Different strokes, UK-US. A look at the differences in character between the British and the Americans. This is the fourth part of our series on the differences in characters between Brits and Yanks. Find out about British and American attitudes to honesty, class and tradition. There's a world of difference.
Happy birthday. Americans are generous when it comes to giving gifts. Almost any occasion is an excuse to give a present. Christmas, birthdays, weddings, graduations, the birth of a child, a new neighbor moving in, someone leaving, or the arrival of a new pet. Americans will usually open their gifts in the presence of the giver, and on opening them, they'll say things such as, "Oh, that's great, you're so kind," or, "Oh, I so wanted that." The Brits are different, of course. Giving gifts isn't so popular, and in certain parts of Britain, particularly in the north, it is unknown. On being presented with a gift, Brits have a natural sense of suspicion. "What's this?" they may ask. "It's not my birthday. What are you after?"
Honesty. Americans are generally straightforward when it comes to expressing themselves. If the weather is bad, they'll tell you it's bad. If they're feeling ill, they'll let you know. And if they don't like a film, they'll be frank about it. The British, on the other hand, prefer to use something known as understatement. This consists of saying that something good or bad isn't as good or bad as it really is. They understate the facts. So, if the weather is really bad and it's 50 degrees below zero, they'll tell you that it's just a bit cold. And if they've just had a serious surgical operation and they're feeling ill, they'll tell you that they're just a bit under the weather. And if they see a really boring film, they'll say it wasn't bad. There are also extreme cases, such as the artillery officer who lost his leg in the Battle of Waterloo and who asked his sergeant if he could kindly look for the leg. Or the English gentleman who was involved in a car accident and who lost his right hand. On being asked how he felt, he replied, "Oh, I mustn't grumble. At least I've got the use of my left hand."
Class. Americans like to think that everyone in America is equal, and that anyone can live the American dream. This is partly true. Just look at their presidents and politicians. One president was a Hollywood actor, and the current governor of California is an ex-weightlifter. In theory, there's no such thing as a class system in America. Just about everyone likes to think they're middle class, and that even a plumber can have a son who's a university professor. However, this is a myth, and Americans have their own upper classes, the Kennedys and the Vanderbilts, and lower classes, white trash, hillbillies, and marginalized groups. In Britain, the class system is much more evident, and people are proud of the class they belong to, each group having its own accent, way of dressing, and residential zone.
Tradition. Americans like tradition, but they aren't sentimental about it. After all, they can go to Europe for things like that. They are much more practical and admire things for their functionality. If it isn't serving any practical purpose, it doesn't deserve to exist, and it's time to pull it down. In Britain, things are different, and for the Brits, tradition represents continuity, and it must be preserved at all costs. In the past, they have fought to defend the pound, red telephone boxes, the pint, and imperial measurements, miles, feet, inches. It's not practical, but it's British, and this is why judges still wear 18th century wigs, and there are lords and ladies.
Sense of humor. American humor is based entirely on jokes about lawyers. In American society, this profession is hated, and there are literally thousands of lawyer jokes. Here's a typical one. A funeral procession is passing by and is being led by a man walking beside a lion. Behind the coffin, there is a line of around 200 people. A bystander asks, "Hey, what's going on?" And the guy at the front says, "My lion ate my lawyer, and this is the lawyer's funeral." "Hey," says the bystander, "can I borrow your lion? I've got a lawyer I'd like to have eaten." "Sorry," says the man, pointing to the 200 people behind the coffin. "You'll have to get to the end of the line. Those guys are waiting for the same thing."
The British sense of humour is more sophisticated. It's based on sarcasm, irony, and misunderstandings. Here's an example of this type of humour from a popular British comedy series called Blackadder. In this scene, Blackadder, an aristocrat at the court of King George III, is talking to the Prince of England. This English prince isn't very clever, unlike our current ones.
"Some fellow said that I had the wit and sophistication of a donkey."
Oh, an absurd suggestion, sir.
"You're right, it is absurd."
Unless, of course, it was a particularly stupid donkey.